All right, thank you so much for staying with us here on The New Dawn. We want to take a look at what's happening on the newspapers this particular morning. And of course, on set, I do have Senator Gloria Roba, who's joining us for this particular conversation and to make sense of the current affairs in the country at the moment. Hello, Senator.
Good morning.
You have a good one?
Yes.
Thank you so much for making time. Really do appreciate that you could make it this morning. I know waking up is not always...
Very early.
It is not everyone's cup of tea, but you are here. Thank you so much for coming. All right, I want us to start with the People Daily. The title, or rather the headline on the People Daily, is How Ruto Lies Killed Nithi 12. Now, this is to satisfy his appetite for votes. President pledged to fix Killer Bridge once elected. He did not. For his deceit, families paid with the lives of loved ones. This is a story on page 4 of the People Daily. Another story that is making headlines on this particular newspaper is why lawyers want Koome removed from judiciary. Now, petitioner accuses Chief Justice of incompetence for barring Ahmed Nasir from the Supreme Court. This is a story on page 5 of the People Daily. Another story making headlines on this particular newspaper, of course, a Media Max production, is Land Boss Under Fire Over Billions, a story on page 2 of the People Daily. You can grab this particular newspaper and get to read these stories that are making headlines on the People Daily. I also want us to take a look at what's happening on the Standard. And the Standard, the title on the Standard rather, is More Projects, More Debt. Now, President William Ruto met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping with Kenya's long wish list of funding and development support, including for big-ticket projects such as SGR extension and dualling of the Rironi-Mau Summit Malaba Road. But there is a flip side to it, raising the country's debt burden. We'll be getting into the details of that to try and understand why this particular meeting and funding is important for the nation, and if at all the rising debt is something that we should be putting into consideration when we are making these particular deals. Another story making headlines on the Standard is a 1.5 billion salary increase for civil servants, and calming a strike threat by civil servants. The government splashed 1.5 billion on salary increment for civil servants in phase 2 of their collective bargaining agreement, raising pay by between 1,300 and 5,000 shillings and improving allowances. Of course, a story on page 8 of the Standard. Another story making headlines on this particular newspapers is cost of teacher strike. Parents face unplanned for expenditure. Another story is a pain of athlete burnt by her suspected lover. Now, these are stories making headlines on the Standard. We'll be getting into the details of that in just a few. We also want to take a look at the Daily Nation. And this headline on the Daily Nation is Teachers Reject Back to Work Deal, which says that tutors across the country have expressed outrage at the calling off of their strike on Monday evening, saying they got a raw deal in the agreement their union struck with the Teachers Service Commission. They now want Kuppet national officials who made the decision to step down. This is a story on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Another story making headlines on the Daily Nation is 6 billion shillings windfall for IBC City Hall lawyers. Of course, you can get this particular story on page 7. Now, dozens of law firms will get 6.2 billion for legal services offered to the Electoral Commission and the Nairobi County Government. IBC owes 11 law firms at least 1 billion for services, including defending it in the 2022 presidential poll petition. Under security, pay hardware boost for Kenya police fighting Haiti gangs. Now, some 356 Kenyan police officers in the Caribbean nation have been paid their July allowance, but the August pay is still outstanding. A story on page 10. On matters of business, Kenya grants lower tax to British-made alcoholic drinks. This comes months after London made an official complaint to Nairobi over higher taxation of some of its products. And also rogue Kanjo bosses now running parallel force. A story on page 17 of the Daily Nation. Let's take a look at what's happening on the Star. And the headline on the Star is Inside Kalonzo's 2027 Strategy to Beat Ruto. Bakassi East Member of Parliament Babu Wino is already gravitating towards Wiper leaders' camp. A story on page 4 and 5 of the Star. Of course, and eyes on the ball, he has started countrywide tours, revamped command center. This is, of course, Kalonzo Musyoka, and this comes at the backdrop of the exit of Raila Odinga from the local political scene and heading to the AUC. That's if he gets elected to be the continental chairperson. Right? Ruto pursue Rironi Mau Summit Highway in China trip. Of course, we'll be getting into the details of this particular story. And another story making headlines on the Star is learn to talk and save your marriage. Couples advised during Mombasa Forum. Impeachment nightmare. Country chiefs push for protection against ouster within 2 years after polls. Of course, we'll be getting, this will be forming our basis of conversation this particular morning as we focus on the counties and that particular bill. And another story making headlines is civil servants follow teachers in calling off work boycott as lecturers remain adamant. One more newspaper here is Taifa Leo, and it's the headline on Taifa Leo says Kenya yakimbilia mpango wa kando. Now, mikopo imedokezwa kuwa Rais Ruto ambaye tangu mwaka 2022 ametegemea sana Amerika katika ushirikiano wa kiuchumi na ustawi. Yuko nchi hiyo ya mashariki pamoja na viongozi wengine wa Afrika kujadili maafikiano mapya kuhusu mikopo. Another story making headlines in on Taifa Leo rather is sababu za Raila kutua China ni dhamira kuu ni kushawishi viongozi wa bara kumteua kinara wa AUC. Ajali nyingine ya angamiza wasafiri 9, matatu za gongana na trailer katika barabara ya Kericho Kisumu na kuwa abiria. That is a story on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Right? Now we want to focus on this one of the stories that's the issue to do with the president moving to China. And the Standard says more projects, more debts. I want to start, no, wait a minute. I have another guest on set. Honorable Chege Maura, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Good, thank you. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Yeah, welcome to the program this particular morning. So, yeah, Honorable Chege Maura is the Secretary General for County Assemblies Forum and also the Member of County Assembly, Ngara Ward. Watu Ngara wanasemaje?
Wametulia.
Wamamo in the street.
Yeah.
Walienda street. Amu kwenda nao.
Walikuwa street.
Walikuwa street. All right, I want us to look at more projects, more debt. The head of state is out of the country and, has gone to China and to try to look for funding for these particular projects. And we're talking about the extension of the SGR in this particular road that you're mentioning in the newspapers. What do you make of this? Let me start with you, Senator Gloria, first.
Chacha, can you allow me first, before we go there, to just call these people daily out? Can you allow me? Because you have a very strong, sensational headline, how Ruto lies killed Nithi, 12. And I have, I came early to studio, so I have read the story. And you can't draw any parallels. I mean, is it what you are allegedly calling the Ruto lies? Is it irresponsible driving? Is it, let's now just speak about headlines and how, because this is a very, People Daily is a very, it's not a small newspaper. This is a national newspaper. This is a newspaper that many Kenyans read and rely on for the truth and facts. And when I see that kind of headline, it just makes me wonder, there's free speech, there's freedom of speech, but then there's also, misleading a whole population, because we are talking about the debts that the same Ruto is going to China to pick for projects, which I'm very sure we are going to start complaining about. And then those projects are actually the same ones when we say we can't take this much debt because of the debt anchor or one reason or another, it becomes the Ruto lies that killed people.
Okay, according to the People Daily, you're talking about the pledge that was made when you actually during the campaign period, and to their justification. If at all that pledge was met in order in terms of fixing the Killer Bridge once he was elected.
When this accident happened, actually, I had the privilege to contact the former roads minister, And if you read the story that is here, it says that the former road minister actually, the minister of roads, he actually sat down with the area leaders and with the authorities involved, and they agreed on redesigning the bridge. And when I asked the same to that minister, he actually said that it was redesigned. And they were in the process of getting into the thick of things, which is to go down and figure out where they're going to get the monies from. By the way, when we are speaking of all of these projects which allegedly are lies, let us also speak of the failed finance bill, which was supposed to finance some of these projects. You know, it's like telling me today, if my bill for sanitary pads does not go through, does not get the votes that it requires, 24 minimum, and then 2 months down the line after that bill, in the event, in the very unlikely event that it is not supported, you come back and say how Oroba lies have gotten teenage girls pregnant. You cannot draw parallels like that. And you know, the thing is, why it upsets me is that if this was like a blog or like one of those magazines that people don't trust, it would be okay. But people actually trust People Daily. Okay.
Okay, I've gotten your point.
Yeah, so I think also ethical journalism needs to be spoken about in this country.
Okay, but the deputy president recently spoke on the same issue, and I think this was during the weekend when you know, he was in that particular area and spoke on the accident that had happened, and also in terms of fixing this particular bridge that he said they had made that particular promise and they were looking into that. So to some extent, it's an admission that on their part, they did not get to fulfill that particular promise.
A pledge was made. For sure, a pledge was made. And for sure, it was put into consideration to the extent that the redesigning of the bridge had already actually been done. And this is information that I'm giving you based on the former Minister of Transport. But when you now say Ruto is killing people because the pledge was not seen to fruition, yet we know why some of the projects are pending. No, and forget only infrastructure projects. We know why, even when we went into the school feeding program, there's issues. Because we literally have issues with living within our means. Okay. This is the same people, and thank you, Gen Z, for telling us to live within our means. When we try to live within our means, you then cannot spin it as Ruto killing people. Okay. Let's talk about rogue drivers. Let's talk about just carelessness. Let's talk about even basic infrastructure like lighting within our roads. But let's not just decide, if it rains today, you know, look at Ruto. If it's too hot today, shame on Ruto. That cannot be where we are going as a country. And by the way, allow me to just send my condolences to the family, to the families and friends of those who passed away. And, you know, it's very unfortunate because I participate in many of these groups, empowerment groups, women groups, and I also travel a lot in groups. So when I saw this, for me, it was also shocking. Okay. But let's not sensationalize some of these things. Noted,
Senator. Okay, so into our conversation this particular morning, just a few minutes before I allow Honorable Chege to jump into it. More projects, more debt. That's what you're talking about this particular morning, and it's a headline on the Standard. The head of state is in China as to speak at the moment. Would we speak to that first?
The issue of debt and projects, whether we like it or not, first of all, we are guided by the debt anchor. Remember, we moved from the numerical figure of how much, where the debt ceiling would be, into an anchor, which was justified by the bill in terms of if you are making more money as a country, then you should be able to borrow to the extent of the income that you're generating. But I think we need to be very careful, because there is this interests of people saying we need this, we need that, but we must prioritize, because to some extent today, yes, we are enjoying the expressway, but at what cost and for how long are we going to pay that debt, and who are the beneficiaries, and what is the return on the investment on any other project that is being spoken about on that table. So, and I believe that the president is very much aware, because these are some of the conversations when we're having our parliamentary group, we are saying, okay, yes, we want all these nice things, but we also don't want our grandchildren to be heavily in debt as we have been. So I think there's a balance there that we need to strike. And also to prioritize what projects do we really need as at now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prioritizing the projects that we need at the moment. This particular, what you're borrowing at this particular moment are 2 trillion shillings, which to some extent would increase to the national debt, which is already at 10.56 trillion shillings. The project that we want to finance is the extension of the SGR and the Rironi Mau Summit Road, Malaba Road. Is this a priority at the moment?
Thank you, Brian. I think the first thing we need to look at is what is the economics around the projects that we are looking at. And I think feasibility studies must have been done on the cost of the SGR. And so by now, what government needs to be telling Kenyans is that by extending the SGR from Naivasha to maybe the border, then it means this kind of numbers, it means this kind of money that is being plugged in. And so you look at the numbers that are going to, we are going to get and the projections over the years vis-a-vis the cost of the loan, so that we can be able to ascertain how much money are we going to get out of this project so that it can fund itself. And if it's a long, crazy time, then it's not a priority. Okay. If it's reasonable and if it's going to reduce the number of accidents and all these other nice things that will happen if people move out of the roads, then it makes sense. The Rironi Mau Summit one, again, to what kind of, how does it build, into the economics around it, and then we do the costing, and then now we can have a conversation around that. Okay. But that is one. Number two, how do we, the former model, or the current model that we have of road maintenance levy, whereby we are taxed by every fuel consumption that we're having, with that amount, and with the money at the national level based also with the money at the county levels as far as roads are concerned, how do we also look at ways of also pulling those projects together so that we're able to do these projects within, within the constraints that we have? Because at the end of the day, if you're talking about a 2 trillion, Brian, 2 trillion is the current, what we're expecting KRA to give us by end of the financial year. That's a whole budget for a whole year. For a whole year. Yeah. So does it make sense that you borrow, even you, when you borrow, you don't borrow exactly amount or even more of what you're expecting, expecting to get from your salary, 100%. Okay. Yeah. So for me, I would want us to have a more deeper conversation around it and the discourse to be around it so that people also see the value. Okay. And then again, we also need to cost Mombasa, Nairobi of the SGR so far. What kind of numbers are we getting? How have we been benefiting so far? What needs to be done to move, to increase its, revenue generation? Yes. And so if it doesn't work for us, let's go to MGR. Let's go back to meter gauge. Let's revamp it. Let's see how it can work in the meantime. Okay. I think the most important concept that we need to realize here is that how do we live within the constraints of our means, because the cost of a loan is an issue, cost of the projects is an issue. Running government in itself, I mean, you're opening it up. Senator is talking about the Tharakanithi Bridge is also an issue. We also have teachers here on the other end. We also have, doctors here, civil servants, all these things. The government must also balance all these things.
And that's what I want to talk about in terms of the balancing aspect of it, because you have a public that will demand development projects most of the time. You don't have the money to finance this. You are trying to run a government not on loans, but at the end of the day, you are going to be measured as an elected leader based on what you've been able to do for the people. So how do you balance this?
And that's why politicians are the ones who run government. You come and convince your people that this is not, we are not ready for this yet. SGR, by the way, was designed in Kibaki's time. Why didn't he not do it? Because the economics would not agree with it. So he let it go. The feasibility for expressway was done actually in his time. It never happened. Why? Because of what he was able to collect and what he was able to, give out as concessions and all that kind of thing. So he let it go. Uhuru came, prioritized it, it's good. But as she's saying, at what cost? You get. Okay. So sometimes we need to think about it, and maybe it's not a bad thing. Kenya is I think it's for private sector, I think it's a good place to invest.
Okay.
PPP, for example, as I finish, public-private partnership can come into play, or better still, build, operate, and transfer. Let's get companies that are willing to pump in money, do their own project, let it be theirs for about 20, 25 years, and then revert it back to us. Okay. If we want to meet somewhere in the middle. But having all these things and then going back to tax Kenyans, it's a time bomb. Okay. And you saw recently with the Gen Zs. Yeah. And that should be,
I don't know, working point to some extent, where the nation realizes, by the way, there's something that is happening in this particular country, we need to be very careful with the kind of decisions we make. But Senator Gloria, as you finalize on this particular conversation, what is the risk of having, the reliance again on debt at the time when you have a government that says we don't want to be relying so much on debt, we don't want to be borrowing, to be able to be financing most of the things that we want to do?
What are our options? We have tried to broaden the base of tax collection. That didn't work, or that hasn't worked, or that has been rejected. But we still have to run government. And it is the same electorate that is still demanding for better services and additional services. So I always ask people, when you come to the table to complain, give me options. What are the options? Our options is that we broaden the collection of our taxes, which is what the Kenya Kwanza government was trying to do by ensuring that everyone that is working is at least contributing to that national basket, yeah, including what now we are saying the Mamamboga and Boda Boda, because they still enjoy the services, whether it is the national health insurance cover, whether it is the roads. Everybody uses these services. So you can't say that we are not going to tax this one, but we are going to tax this one. So if now we cannot broaden that a collection, then what are our options? Then we have to borrow, because some of these things that are stagnant. In fact, right now, in terms of infrastructure, the focus is not on new infrastructure. It's on all the pending roads that had begun that are not completed. That is actually the focus. And now that is what we are trying to figure out. Let's complete this before we even start dreaming about other dual carriages and whatnot. Yeah. But having said that, I also think there is a very important part that we are missing here. It is the responsibility of leaders, elected leaders, to actually go and speak to the electorate and sensitize the electorate on the reality of how things work. You feel and every time when I see a constituency of people, whether a county or a ward, or a constituency, I always ask myself, who is their leader? Because sometimes the people go out and they're feeding on fake news and they're feeding on illusions. And it's because their leader has not taken their time to do the work, to go and do enough civic education and sensitization to tell people this is actually the situation on the ground. Why I say that, how come when it comes to infrastructural projects, senators are not looked upon? Because the people know that senators don't have any kitty, they don't have any fund, they don't have GAF, they don't have CDF, they don't have, so the people already know, by the way, senators are one pesa, so don't ask them for roads. And that is, it's because also the senators who have been there before and who are there now, they keep sensitizing their people, telling them, even if I wanted to assist you, the money has to come from A, B, or C. Now, for me, I think that our elected leaders should also go back and sensitize the electorate and tell them, while you're demanding that I give you so-and-so road, please understand that these are the implications. Either our debt is going to go up, or we don't have this money, or we have to move this money from this project to that one. And I think that is where leaders are failing. You hang around these elected leaders in the House. So why don't they do that? Why is there no sensitization? Because from how you're speaking, it's like it hasn't gotten to the ground. It has not. It has not gotten to the ground. And when I say elected, by all means, I mean elected through the ballot and specially elected, because I'm specially elected. And there's also a responsibility that I have gotten or has been put upon me. And I think there is a lot of laxity on elected leaders understanding their role in each and every single step. Sometimes we sit, and I think the finance bill was a very good example, because suddenly the elected leaders had to go and explain themselves, something that has never happened before. So had they gone to sensitize the people in the ground before that whole issue came up, they wouldn't feel the need to go back to explain themselves.
Okay.
And that's and that's why we go on recess. Like now we're on recess. We're on recess because you're supposed to go back to the electorate and do now the work that you need to do in terms of sensitization, you touching base with the people on the ground, so that by the time you come back to Parliament, when we go back to Parliament on session, you are able to represent them and their views based on what the two of you have discussed.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to add on that before I take a break?
I think number one is that we need also to ask ourselves what are our priorities as a country, as a government, and as a people. Because at the end of the day, if your priority is just projects, right? But at what cost?
Okay.
You know,
so,
at the end
so
of the day,
what will be the priority of a government if it's not project?
The priority of the government should be how to make life
delivery.
easier for the people, service delivery, and put money in their pockets.
Okay.
If you had money in your pocket sufficiently, I'm telling you, you would not need a bursary. We would not be having discussions about help and all those kinds of things. Okay. So I think that balance need also, and I'm happy that the country is also maturing to this kind of a discussion, both here and even at the local area. Okay. And I agree, it's the work of the elected people to go and have that conversation. It's the work of the sitting government also to go another step and explain itself, because when you come in, you know, when you're campaigning and the reality of governing, those are two different things. Yeah.
Okay. Right. All right. We do want to take a break here on New Dawn. Of course, when we come back, we'll be taking a look at, you know, focusing on the counties a little bit and tell you exactly what's happening there. And, you know, how do we get to impeach a governor? There's a new bill that we'll be discussing in just a few. Don't go too far. Engage us on our socials. Satamoy Brian on X at K24 TV. We are also live on Facebook and on YouTube. So do send your feedback on those particular social platforms. We'll be sampling some of it as we continue with this program this particular morning. All right?